Line. Thanks for joining us. Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall's with us this morning. If you'd like to join in the conversation, lots to touch on. Yeah, you talked about fentanyl and the concern about all of that, and you know, the overdoses. It's interesting. Again, from your realm, I mean, every once in a while you hear about fentanyl getting into jails and the overdoses that happen. Now they're talking about making these fentanyl test strips available. And I just wonder how many of these addicts who use these drugs that might have fentanyl in it were going to take the time to test their drug before they use it. But that is one maybe answer. Have you seen that, where they're talking about these strips? They're cheap, they can be provided. You can just take a droplet of whatever you're using on there, and if it turns pink, don't take it. That means, or whatever color.
Yeah, and Nick, it's funny, we live this situation, all sorts of, I met with our internal affairs, our investigators yesterday morning about some things that are going on. We did a search, a sweep of our buildings. Not unusual to do that. But nowadays, when you discover something that looks like a substance that shouldn't be, that's hidden in the ceiling, or, you know, that in our facilities, the ability to get that tested and know what it is, it's always been a little tricky. It's time consuming, and you know, you see a white powdery substance in the old days and you want to see what it is. The problem for us is we can't pin that on someone every time. Like, we find it somewhere, it's not where you live in your housing unit, it's not where on your person.
How do they get it in now, though? Because you've told me now you guys have the point where they can't bring books in. You used to say they would drop LSD on pages and certain words, and then they'd get the book in there and someone could just take that page off and eat it. You don't do that anymore. So how do they sneak in? I mean, I'm sure there's ways. How do inmates sneak drugs in nowadays to a prison like yours, jail like yours?
But I mean, this is a constant, always will be.
Yeah,
a
there's always going to be. They're going to find ways.
Yeah, there are staff. First of all, let's just get that out of the way. There are staff who are compromised and are, whether it's paid, we believe that even happens.
Someone say, here, I'm going to give you $1,000 if you just sneak these pills into my.
Yeah, and it's not hard. I mean, it's bad. It's criminal. I sent a message out this past week to our staff, reminding them that I have met with General Fund just about a month ago. Just saying, look, here's where we're going, because of how deadly the lethality of the drug really is. That when a person is going to die in a jail, the person that helps him get that on the street and in here, I'm very eager to go prosecute. And I want you to know that as staff, right? And so there's a staff element in any system like this where the temptation or to be compromised. But we have all sorts of other. We have vendors that come in and out. Believe it or not, they bring in commissary in. There are people who bring in rugs. I don't mean in the housing unit, but into the buildings. And believe it or not, family members getting in touch with the person who delivers the rug and leaves something under the rug. And I could go a million directions with you. So you got vendors, you got volunteers, you got staff. We have inmates who go in the community and work and then come back in. Now they're called trustees for a reason. That they have a classification level that allows them to go and do work in the community, and they come back in and live inside the facility at night. And there's always been, we search them every day, inside and out. There's all sorts, but people will do things with drugs, and you can't imagine, from swallowing it to hiding it to inserting it in all sorts of ways and places, and even coming into booking. I mean, people who come in the door because they have substances on them will, some very bizarre things. We search. We have a scanner, scans your whole body. It's not perfect. It catches a lot of it, but it will always be one of the difficult things to do. The difference today for me than the last 30 years is, you had to have a quantity.
Right.
And we could find quantity.
It takes so little. I mean, a tiny bit of fentanyl or any kind of opioid that can come in, and that'll do it.
This is kind of fascinating to me. When I started working there in the late 80s, you could smoke. I mean, you couldn't even walk down the hallway. It was so full of smoke. In '96, we stopped cigarette smoking or tobacco use. So what was funny was, after '96, what became the drug of choice was tobacco, because people who were addicted to smoking so there was a big focus on trying to sneak tobacco in. We'd catch all sorts of stuff. And looking back, I mean, we worked hard at trying to do that, but that wasn't that big of a deal. You'd see the smoke, you'd smell the smoke, we'd find it. It wasn't deadly. It wasn't, a problem, and we would obviously filter that today. And over those last 20 years, the change has been, what are you trying to get in? And today's difference is, we have overdose potential every week, and multiple, where people are coming in booking, and either because of what they had on the streets or what they get. The other risky business in our side of it is, let's say that Nick Beres has been on the street for years and was strung out on heroin, he's using however much a day or whatever. When he comes in, we're detoxing you, getting you off of the heroin, and let's just make it up. Whatever amount you were shooting in your arm or smoking before, if you have 4 or 5 months here and you're clean in jail, what people do happens in the streets all the time. When they go back to that same amount they were used to when they came in, they'll kill you.
Yeah.
And overdoses happen every day in the streets from coming out of a treatment center.
Yep.
You're sober for a week or two,
and you can use the same amount.
And in jail is real likely that happens.
Okay.
And so when you get whatever hit you had, it is dramatic, and it is very likely it can kill you. And so we're using Narcan a lot and trying to help. And I, we do an officer employee of the month, and people saving someone from an overdose doesn't make the list. I mean, you save 3 a day. I mean, that's a huge story. But my point is that's a bizarre day where there was something that got into a cell block.
Right.
Multiple people using it.
We hear about that sometimes where it happens. With regard to jails, a question. Someone knew you were coming on today, and they emailed me, and they had a question. Maybe not so much about Davidson County, but how do family members on the outside, and how do you view it when they get calls from inmates? Saying, or notes, and I get it all the time, especially for the one in Trousdale County, but other just smaller county jails where they say an inmate, aside from maybe being beaten up or abused, but is ill, and they claim they're not getting the pills. And I know a lot of times they're complaining to their parents, and they're, it's not true always, but I would imagine some of them are. And in some of these smaller, lesser staffed facilities, I hope and believe with yours that doesn't happen. You guys respond if someone's sick or has something really bad. But what do parents do, or family members, and how do you handle it when you hear from them and balance between, look, this is just your son complaining, trying to get you to help him out, and it's not an issue, or, okay, I'll look into this if he's really sick?
Yeah, so people who are close to me would hear me say this all the time. One of the hardest things to do sometimes is to watch the family member serve the time. Now, what I'm, and even if you're not guilty, and I'm just using term of time as in jail, and you see that a lot. You'll see people who come to jail, and the nurse came by, they didn't get out of their bunk to take them the aspirin. I mean, we knock on the door, they refuse to see the nurse. I mean, and that's documented, refusal.
Okay.
What happens is that person calls home and says, nurse didn't even come see me today. Now, I'm not saying every case, but this is a large percentage of what we see. So what happens is they didn't do their part of the responsibility to sign up to see the nurse, be there whenever, which is all part of the process. And so instead of going through the next procedure that they're supposed to go through, as an inmate, you can write a grievance. We track every grievance. You said I didn't give my medicine this morning. We search to see who did, why they didn't. If they didn't, we try to get the nurse. I mean, there's all that happens. And there are sometimes our officers don't do their job. Our staff screw this thing up too. That's always there. But what I find more painful to watch, and I believe this, I told my sons growing up, you don't blame the umpire, you don't blame the referee. Life is not going to be suited where you blame everybody for what you didn't accomplish. Why didn't you get a hit on that strike? Why didn't you score a touchdown? I'm not saying referees are perfect, but if you live your life, I just went to trial with a man who's never accepted responsibility for anything he's ever done, Alex Friedman. The reason he's still making up lies as he's walking into the courtroom is he was allowed to blame a system. He blamed private prisons, which that wasn't the fault. Meaning, his whole life has been made of blaming other people. And the reason he's still able to do it is he made a living doing that. And I'm talking about manipulating people. Today, I see people, and it's who call home and give their mom and their dad this amazing grief and pressure to go solve it for them, because that's what they've done. They blamed a lot of times other people most of their life. And so you see the pain is coming from the street. The person who's incarcerated is back in, and I'm not saying high-fiving people, but they've shoveled all that blame on someone else. And so the families are stressing out. And I get this a lot.
So, I bet you hear about it all, because I get it all the time.
And I hate to say this. I don't even want to give a percentage. I mean, I don't. I think
you'd say most of the time it's not an issue. It's them being this way. I mean, that's the problem. The vast majority is probably it's baloney, and they're just trying to pass over the buck and take no responsibility. But every once in a while, because of that, there's probably some legit cases that maybe don't get caught.
Yeah, and I lived in this system for a long time, and my sister lives in the smallest county in the state of Tennessee. Our family lives in the middle-sized counties. I mean, there's all sorts of, and so it's unfair for me to sit here. We have, when you come to jail today, the first person you talk to, the only jail in America America is a mental health, a master's level mental health clinician. What that person is doing is asking how you feel, what is going on, how are you doing. We get an assessment done before any other jail in America ever thinks about it, and we did that to prepare for the behavioral care center. I'm not saying we're right. What I'm saying is we get a baseline of who you are and what's wrong with you early. And then we try to get the medications and so forth. But understand, imagine yourself. I mean, I've always said that. I've never smoked in my life. Okay. Imagine you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. You land there today, you can't smoke. I don't know what that would feel like.
So you're going to have some withdrawal.
That is a terrible thing, I think, to come off of. And by the way, and you also drink 4 days a week. You're not supposed to drink there. All this stuff is taken away. You're not a happy camper, and I'm not happy. I'm not proud of this. I'm just saying, what an amazing way to go from the street life to here. And one of the things we find is, and people get here, they're on insulin, they're on other things. We you know, the trying to clean up all of the things that are going on with people who are living on the streets and drugs and so forth, clean up and try to maintain for a person who is desperately wanting a cigarette and alcohol and drugs. It is, and what do? They're going to vent that. And they vent that oftentimes to family, and they feel like crap, horrible, I'm sure.
And then we'll take a break, and then the parents reach out to you or they contact the media, and you can just hear it in the mother's voice.
Pain.
They're just anguished. All right, we'll take a break on that note. We can take some calls, more of our conversation with Sheriff Oct right after this.